I believe strongly that those of us in positions of authority have a duty to act upon allegations of this nature.
But this is the story everyone's talking about. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau there speaking in Ottawa a short time ago. He was reacting to a stunning turn of events on Parliament Hill, which has seen two of his MPs kicked out of the party caucus for alleged harassment. The complainants, two members of the NDP. The suspended MPs deny any wrongdoing. This is a developing story and one that Rosemary Barton is tracking for you from Ottawa. Rosemary, first of all, fill us in on who these MPs are and the allegations against them.
So the two MPs that have been suspended effectively from the Liberal Party today are Scott Andrews. He's an MP for Newfoundland and has been since 2008, and Massimo Pichetti, a Quebec MP who has been there since 2002. The way that we are led to believe this unfolded, according to the Liberal leader, is that on October 28th, an MP came to him directly, an NDP MP came to him directly to talk about what she qualified as personal misconduct. There is no indication from the Liberal leader or from the NDP or anyone else about the nature of these allegations. We don't know if they were sexual harassment. We don't know really the details about them. But this person came to Justin Trudeau. He then got his caucus whip involved, who met with the two MPs who have made the allegations, at which point they decided that it was important to act quickly. And so the two Liberal MPs who are now under investigation have been removed from the caucus. Here's a little bit more of the Liberal leader.
It's 2014. We have a duty to protect and encourage individuals in these situations to come forward. The action must be fair but decisive. It must be sensitive to all affected parties, but recognizing how difficult it is to do so, it must give the benefit of the doubt to those who come forward.
So a decisive move from the Liberal leader today, and a high level of sensitivity to the fact that these two MPs came to him, or at least one of them came to him with this complaint directly. Important here to point out, Carol, that no one, neither the Liberal Party nor the NDP, are publicly acknowledging that indeed these are female NDP MPs, but we have learned this from sources. At this stage, the two MPs do not want to be identified, do not want to speak publicly, and certainly aren't relaying what happened involving these two people that have now been pushed out of the Liberal caucus. But the NDP leader took a moment as well to speak about, what needs to happen in the House of Commons, which is, of course, their workplace. Take a listen to that.
We're deeply saddened by these serious allegations. Members of Parliament from all parties have to take these matters seriously. Here on Parliament Hill and in every workplace, women have a right to be in a secure work environment. Everyone who works in these places has a right to be in a secure work environment free of harassment. We want to make sure that all parties work on these issues, and I think that it's something that we should do together to show that it is something on which we all agree.
So it was obviously a topic of conversation inside the NDP caucus as well, where I guess they are grappling with the fact that these allegations have come forward. This is a fairly unusual circumstance, particularly that it has been made public, obviously.
Yeah, I know there's some discussion as to whether this is an allegation of harassment or not, but I think we're getting our cue from Thomas Mulcair himself, who just said everybody's entitled to a workplace free from harassment, which to me indicates that that's the nature of the allegation.
Sure. I mean, I think it's harassment. I don't think we know to what extent it is sexual harassment and to what level it went. We've also been asking questions about whether the police need to or should be involved. No one is getting into that issue either.
All right. So what happens from here on in?
Well, this is where things get a bit complicated because, as I said, this is quite rare that this happened, and there really isn't a process in place inside the House of Commons to deal with these kind of complaints. This is the letter that the Liberal whip, Judy Foote, sent to the Speaker of the House of Commons outlining some of the concerns and writing the following to Speaker Andrew Scheer, saying, to my knowledge, there is no precedent or established process for dealing with a situation such as this. The House of Commons has a process for administration employees to address allegations of misconduct in the workplace, but there's no established process for complaints between members. So they don't see things between MPs. Now, the Speaker of the House of Commons has just put out a press release moments ago, and he is saying in his press release that he has directed that the matter be taken up at the Board of Internal Economy at the earliest available opportunity. The problem with the Board of Internal Economy, of course, as you know, Carol, is it is a committee made up of MPs of all parties. And I know there were questions at Justin Trudeau's press conference about when it comes to allegations like these, you know, perhaps a third party needs to be involved. That, I think, will be one of the things that the Board of Internal Economy considers as they go forward with what is really an unprecedented day here on Parliament Hill.
All right. The CBC's Rosemary Barton in Ottawa. Rosemary, thank you very much. So how does the third-party process work? Joining me now for more on this story is David Klein. He is the lawyer who represents over 300 women right now, officers of the RCMP in a class action lawsuit over allegations of widespread harassment within the RCMP. That included both former and current RCMP officers. David Klein joins me from Vancouver live via Skype. David Klein, let me put it this way to you, that we're hearing now of harassment allegations against two members of the House of Commons from two other members. In the last 10 days, we heard of allegations of harassment and assault and worse against someone who was a beloved national radio host who worked at the CBC. And then there was the 300 women that you represent. Is the lid of harassment in the workplace for women coming off, being opened up in this country?
It certainly appears that it is. There's a greater sense of awareness, and what we've seen with the RCMP case and with what's happened recently at the CBC is that there's a great deal of empathy for women who've been placed in this situation and understanding that women are entitled to a harassment-free work environment.
How prevalent is the problem, in your opinion?
It's been prevalent for decades. What's new about this is that there's a greater sense of public awareness, there's a greater sense of public sympathy, and to a limited degree, some women are more prepared to come forward now, tell their stories, and seek redress. What we've heard in our class action case is women coming forward and saying that they don't want to seek any relief or any remedy or any compensation necessarily for themselves, but they want change within the workplace. They want the organization to be better for women who are there now and women who come into the organization in the future.
Why is it important to say that? Because is it because that there's still a suspicion of that women are in it or making these allegations for some sort of nefarious reasons?
You know, it's interesting to hear their stories and understand why they come forward. Very often they're reluctant to come forward, because they won't be believed, but more importantly, because they think it will make the situation worse. And so a lot of the women in our case, in our class action, have come forward. Currently, the process is anonymous. They can come forward, they can tell their stories, they can participate in attempting to make positive change within the organization, but not necessarily advance a claim later on. So we see, for example, in the CBC case, that many of the women came forward but wanted to remain anonymous. They weren't seeking compensation, they weren't seeking any sort of attention for themselves. What they wanted was change within the organization, change within something to occur that would make it better for women who are there now and forward in the future.
Yeah. David, some people say that's a problem because it leaves people's reputations can be left in tatters just based on anonymous allegations.
You know, the frequency of false allegations is actually very low. That's not to say that it doesn't sometimes occur. Certainly it sometimes occurs. But if you look at study after study, what we've learned is that there's very little exaggeration. There's very little falsehood. Most of the stories are accurate. Another important thing to remember is that if you look at these cases as a single isolated event, you're missing the whole picture. In the workplace harassment against women or against men is something that occurs with a series of small events over a long period of time. and it eventually causes serious psychological damage. So one of the concerns that women have is that when they come forward and they tell a particular event, it will sound trivial. And in isolation, it may be trivial, but it's part of a pattern of conduct, and a pattern of conduct that has to stop within the workplace.
Oh, give me an example of the series of small events that lead to a harassment claim.
Well, it might be a sexist joke. It might be a cartoon that's left on taped on a locker. We have our lead plaintiff in our class action lawsuit had a dildo that was left in her desk drawer. You know,
right.
these are things that if you went and made a claim for just that single event, you might get some remedy. But when these things are happening week after week, year after year, often perpetrated by more than one individual because of a certain culture or climate, it can have a truly debilitating effect on the victim.
Yeah, we've heard those allegations against some pilots at Air Canada, for example, leaving pornographic material where female pilots can certainly find them. What is the base of this kind of sexual harassment, in your opinion? Is it blundering males who think they're making a joke, or is it hostility that's meant to send a message to women who work in that environment?
Well, harassment, gender-based harassment, is part of a bigger picture related to workplace harassment generally. It focuses on differences. The most obvious difference in a case like ours, in our class action, is the gender difference. But bullying and harassment occurs with respect to lots of other differences. Within an organization, it may be position of power, it might be size, it might be race, it might be or sexual preference. So it's a broader picture. The remedy for this is top down. And so what we see today, for example, is Justin Trudeau taking immediate action and saying that this is simply not acceptable. What's important within an organization that wants to eliminate harassment to the greatest degree possible is guidance from leadership and a zero tolerance policy.
Well, that brings me to my next question, because there was a question posed in the National Post newspaper today that I found interesting. I'm going to generalize it. It was a very specific question, but the intent will be the same. Let's say I know in my environment that someone is sexually harassing someone else, and I don't say anything, or I don't do anything about it. Am I complicit?
Well, you're complicit in the ethical sense. In a sense, possibly really depends on what the policies are within the workplace. You know, there are a whole host of remedies that are available to women and other people who are being harassment. Very few of these cases actually end up in a court of law. Most of them are dealt with by the internal procedures within that organization. And, you know, if you have a culture of zero tolerance, one that is led top down, then people will report those instances. What we've learned within our class action lawsuit is that many women have been afraid to report things that they've seen because of fear that it would occur to them as well.
Yeah. And it also, there's an aspect of this that reminds me of the situation at the Vatican with the pedophile priests. It's not only, you know, reprehensible or deemed reprehensible for the people who are doing the harassment, but those who may have wittingly or unwittingly covered for them or didn't do anything about it when they knew.
Yeah, over a period of time, the victims start to blame themselves. They think that they were in some way responsible for that. It takes real process where they finally realize that it's not them, that they're not alone, and that they can come forward. One of the things within a workplace to make a workplace as harassment-free as possible is to create some form of safe mechanism for coming forward. So people aren't reporting through channels that are stacked with management who are part of the harassment process. One of the most useful tools is to have an independent third party that women can go to talk about harassment they're experiencing.
Which is what CBC is doing. So how should that work, David?
You know, it's an organizational structural type of thing. Be a workplace ombudsperson for
Oh, I see. Okay.
for example.
Okay. No, it was my mistake, as I was referring to the third-party investigator, Janice Rubin's firm, which will be coming in to investigate. How does that work?
That's really something that management is doing to externalize the investigation and to shield themselves from criticism, so that they can say that there's someone who's independent, who's completely impartial, and is coming in to investigate what happened. It's part of a more complex situation, and it's not done exclusively for public relations purposes, but it certainly serves a valuable public relations purpose.
Does it have any other valuable purpose?
Oh, of course. It means that people can come forward with a certain amount of anonymity, at least in the beginning, have confidence in the process, that it will be, especially when you have someone who comes in who has some credibility, stature, and experience. So there's tremendous value in that, but it's beyond what most organizations are able to do or able to afford for smaller instances of workplace harassment.
All right. Well, we have to leave it there for you. Very interesting. David Klein, who's representing some 300 female RCMP officers in a class action lawsuit of harassment at the RCMP. Thank you very much for joining me today, David. I so appreciate it.
You're very welcome.